This is another roundup review for some 4K discs that I didn't get a chance to do full reviews of. These are what we've been watching in August 2021, and they are Fast and Furious 8, The Goonies, Lucy and Dr. Sleep. Now there is one other film I was going to include in this group because so many people have asked me to take a look at it. What I've been hearing is this is the best 4K disc I've ever seen, and it is the 4K of My Fair Lady, which I was going to leave for a while, but when we were on the Mondo Mooch recently, actually it was a bit of a mega Mondo Mooch, we popped into HMV and this seemed to be the best option on the shelves, so I thought about time I had a look at My Fair Lady. But there's quite a story to it. It's not the best 4K disc you're ever going to see. It is up there, but there are reasons why it's not quite as good as some of the other 70mm, so I plan to do a full review of that and go into some detail of that later on. So anyway, that takes us to the first of these 4K roundup reviews, Fast and Furious 8, and these seem to have developed a bit since I last saw one of these films. I haven't seen a Fast and Furious since the first one. I didn't think it was particularly good, and so I never watched any of the others. And then John Perry at Mondo Chelovec Movies sent me down this disc with a lovely slipcase. John likes his slipcases and he's rather getting me into them. But John sent this down to me as a gift with the Blu-ray of Starman, which I've had a sneak peek at, and that looks very good too. But he wanted me to have this because he was so impressed with the image quality and the sound, I believe, because the sound is just as incredible as the image on this. It's shot on video and it does look very good. It's not quite the best 4K you're going to see, but it's almost up there with the best. It's a very nice looking disc. But anyway, the cast is amazing. I think just about everyone now wants to be in the Fast and Furious films. I suspect they're just about the biggest things being made, with perhaps the exceptions of the James Bond films. But Helen Mirren appears in this as the mother of one of the characters. Kurt Russell appears, of course, Jason Statham. But the star of the show is still Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez. And at the start of this, they're on their honeymoon in Cuba, which, of course, Cuba keep all their cars running, the old American cars, and they do whatever they can to keep them running, have all sorts of engines in them, and they're just very good at customizing the cars. So great opportunities to show some great locations and some rather special cars. And there's another one of those early type races that they had in the early Fast and Furious films. It's all a bit ridiculous, and if I ever saw a car driving like that, completely in flames and still going faster and faster, I don't think I'd believe it in real life. But somehow in these films they seem to get away with it, and that's a surprising thing about this film. It really is hugely entertaining. I didn't find the first film was, so things have changed a little, and certainly the action in this, the sound, the special effects, everything, really good to look at. Charlize Theron enters the cast, another big name for Fast and Furious, but she enters as the character Cypher, who I believe has been referenced in the previous film, and it's her job to ensnare Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, into taking part in one of her escapades, and it's another excuse for another big action blockbuster with a lot of great cars, and if I had the choice I'd have the Lambo. So it's great fun, it's great to look at, it's great to listen to. It isn't quite the best 4K you're going to see, but it's pretty terrific, and I highly recommend Fast and Furious 8. It had a budget of $250 million, at least that was what was estimated, and it grossed $1.236 billion. So I think we can probably see why just about everyone wants to be in these films now. So they really are huge. It was shot on video at 6K, 4K and 3.4K, but only has a digital intermediate master of 2K, which may seem quite surprising given the budget. But you've got to bear in mind that to compile the special effects in computers at 4K would take 4 times the time that it does to compile them in 2K. And we might be waiting several years before this film came out if they'd have done that. The aspect ratio is 2.40 to 1 and the sound is DTSX. As I said, both are excellent. Now, when I talk about aspect ratios, and I always tend to say now 2.4 to 1, that's because that's approximately what the Panavision frame is, the Panavision scope frame. Now, I know a lot of people get hot under the collar and say, oh, they've cropped it, it should be 2.35 to 1. These are just approximations, and it's worth bearing in mind that you could crop all these films down a lot more. You could crop them to 2.2 to 1 and even 1.85 to 1 some of the time and still get away with it. So most of us wouldn't notice if that was done, but just to point out, these are approximations, and indeed I mentioned the 2.2 to 1. That is of course the 70mm aspect ratio, and to fit it on a 70mm frame, that is exactly what they do. They crop it. So we both had a great time with Fast and Furious 8, so much so that I think I want to see Fast and Furious 7 now. The next film we saw is Luc Besson's Lucy, and this is one I know very well because I used to have the Blu-ray, which I thought was exceptional, so much so that I gave it to a friend who didn't really have any Blu-rays and didn't really know how good Blu-ray could be. But as this came out on 4K, I thought I won't replace that with another Blu-ray. I'll wait until HMV have got it on offer, and indeed this was $9.99 in our recent visit to HMV on M on No Mooch, and the 4K is even better. It stars Scarlett Johansson and Morgan Freeman, and Scarlett plays Lucy, who gets tricked into acting as a delivery girl who is given the job of taking a suitcase into what turns out to be a drugs gang. Naturally, she's taken hostage, drugged, and she has something implanted in her abdomen and is going to be sent around the world somewhere to deliver it. Of course, what's been planted in her abdomen is some form of new synthetic drug, and when she gets beaten up by one of the kidnappers, that bursts in her stomach and it mysteriously starts to unlock 100% of her brain potential. The top man in this field of brain activity is played by Morgan Freeman, and Lucy sets about getting to go and see him, but all the time she's transforming and becoming something completely superhuman. It's a load of nonsense, but it's hugely enjoyable, and with the image quality on this and the sound, it really is something special to watch in the home. I dare say not everyone will like it, but I did right from the first moment I saw it, and it really took me by surprise. So, highly recommended. It was shot in a variety of formats, which included 15 perforations 70mm IMAX, so they really did go for the top image quality in this. But there were also video formats used, which included 2.8K, 4K and 5K. But the aspect ratio is interesting in this one because it's one of those boxes that states 2.39 to 1 for the 4K and 2.4 to 1 for the Blu-ray. Bit strange, but I think it indicates that the people who do these things may not necessarily know as much about film and video as they really ought to. But it's a minor detail, it's an approximation, and they're both the same aspect ratio, I'm sure. The sound on the 4K is Dolby Atmos, and on the Blu-ray it's DTS HD. Both are fantastic, as I've said. I think this is 90 minutes of mayhem, and it's highly recommended. The next film is another one plenty of people asked me to take a look at. It's Richard Donner's 1985 The Goonies. This is about a group of young friends who call themselves the Goonies. Their housing development that they live on is about to be demolished to make way for something, a golf course or something, and they're trying to think of a way to save it and buy all their houses to stop the developers. They're all round at Mikey's house. They go up into the attic and they find a treasure map, and it's a local treasure map, and so just outside their town they set off on a magical adventure. I think a lot of people really enjoy this one. I didn't see it as a child, I was too old, so I never actually saw it until now, and so many people asked me to take a look at it, and I think I will really enjoy this film the next time I look at it. But now that I know what it's about, I know that the children aren't really up to the roles that they're playing, or at least they're not in my opinion, and I'll get over the use of the word guys in every sentence, which is probably not the best use of the English language ever. So I think I'll be ready for it next time, and I'll enjoy it all the more. It is a lot of fun. I don't think this is going to be the best 4K disc you're ever going to see. It's a 35mm anamorphic shoot. There were 70mm blow-ups, but it's largely in a studio and it's quite dark, and that does mean a bit of a lack of definition because of the lower light levels, increased film grain, things like that. But it's still very good. It's not brilliant, but still very good, and it's certainly better than the Blu-ray. So if you like the Goonies, you're going to have to go for the 4K disc. However, Keith at Euphoria Pictures uploaded a video recently looking at the Titans of Cult special edition release of the Goonies, and that does look rather special with a really beautiful steelbook in there. So if this film is one of your favourites, I think I'm going to recommend what Keith at Euphoria has recommended, the Titans of Cult release. This had a budget of 19 million and it grossed 64 million. The aspect ratio is 2.4 to 1 and the sound is DTS 5.1. I think the sound's pretty adequate. It probably sounds just as good as the 70mm did all those years ago. So that brings us to the last film in this roundup, and that is Mike Flanagan's 2019 sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep. Now, this film is fabulous and I don't think I need to say anything more about it. But if you were like me and you were sat on the fence because you were worried that this might spoil The Shining for you, then fear not, because this film is top-notch. Or maybe you should fear, because it's also pretty frightening. So something to bear in mind. If you're of a nervous disposition, this one just might tip you over the edge. I liked everything about this film, but I think it's really helped because the opening of it is just so good. Now, they've reproduced a lot of the main characters from The Shining, and Wendy reappears, but it's not Shelley Duvall, it's Alex Esso. And you look at them and you know it's not the same actress, but you accept it. That's filmmaking. And also the young boy who plays young Danny. You think like you're looking at Danny again. They've reproduced some of the sets for these early sequences, and it just leads you into the film. It takes you down this passage. And I suppose The Shining always does take you down a passage, really, doesn't it? But it just takes you along, and you just feed into it. You get wrapped up with the whole film. And then we have Ewan McGregor, who's always great to watch, and he plays the adult Danny Torrance. And by now Danny's a bit troubled and seems to be a bit of an alcoholic. He's contacted through his mind by Abra Stone, who's played brilliantly by a child actress, Kylie Curran. And how they could have done with actresses and actors like her in the Goonies perhaps, but things move on, don't they? But anyway, she's exceptional in the role as Abra Stone, and they set off on this adventure together that actually leads them back to the Overlook Hotel, and then it gets back into the book of The Shining and the actual ending from that. They've put that original ending in Dr. Sleep, and I think it's just fabulous, the whole thing. No one could have wished for a better sequel to The Shining. It had a budget of 45 million, but surprisingly for such a good film, it only grossed 72 million. So this perhaps points out that a lot of people were like me and they were apprehensive about seeing it. Maybe that will now change on the home video and in particular the 4K market. It has an aspect ratio of 185 to 1, and the sound is Dolby Atmos. It was shot on video at 6.5K and has a true 4K digital intermediate master. However, it didn't look particularly brilliant in here on my system, but maybe it will look better on yours. I think it's actually got Dolby Vision on this one, so maybe it's just incompatible with HDR. But as I said, I think Dr. Sleep is a brilliant film, a wonderful sequel. We couldn't have wished for anything better. So, one other thing to mention here, I think. The latest issue of Cinema Retro is out, and I've had my head buried in this for the past few days. There's a couple of great film in focus features in here. The prime one is Cleopatra, 14 pages of history and notes and posters and all sorts of information about that film. It's made me want to see it again, as Cinema Retro usually does, so there's another Blu-ray I've got to buy. Todd AO, so 70mm, you know it's going to look exceptional. The other film in focus is the 10-page Ice Station Zebra, which I knew was coming, and so I picked up the premium edition from HMV with the postcards. 70mm release again, you know what that's going to look like. It doesn't disappoint. So I might actually do a sort of Cinema Retro review in the near future. We'll see if I can get a few things together there. So well worth subscribing to Cinema Retro if you don't already do so. But possibly the best film I've seen in the past month that I haven't done a full review of is a Blu-ray. It's another one from the HMV Premium Collection. John Travolta, Deborah Winger in Urban Cowboy. Now, I wouldn't have watched this film, but I didn't watch it back in 1980 when it was released. It looked a bit seedy to me and it wasn't the sort of thing I enjoyed, but time has moved on. Here we are 41 years later, and I look back on these things with a bit of nostalgia. Now, I didn't tend to go to cowboy bars in America when I was in my 20s, but nevertheless, this is great to watch. It's got the poster and the postcards with this. It's very good value, even at the 2 for £25 it currently is. I got this in the 2 for 15, so if you can hold off for a sale, I say this one's really worth picking up. So that brings us to the end. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up again, and also consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to keep going and create more videos like this in the future. Till the next one, bye bye for now.